Boo-hoo, Mrs. Clinton. I mean, Mrs. Clinton is the same person who compared Republicans to terrorists. For heaven's sakes, I actually wish Mr. Trump would throw a little more heat Hillary Clinton's way. I feel sometimes as though I'm the only candidate who's consistently been critical of her.
You don't hear many people saying that Donald Trump needs to be more negative. It is early, but the 2016 race has gone ugly early, hasn't it? You got Carly Fiorina there with the boo-hoo-hoo to Hillary because of Hillary's calls that the email scandal coverage is unfair. Clinton, indeed, likening Republicans to terrorists in her own way. And Trump attacking everyone who gets in his way, including our guest, Hugh Hewitt, host of the Hugh Hewitt Show. I will not introduce you the way that Mr. Trump suggests that you be introduced on this show. But what do you think of the state of play? And do you believe it is fair criticism that you added to somewhat of the hostility in the mix?
I'm happy to be called by any of the candidates, whatever they think. And I think Donald Trump is entitled to his criticism of my interviews. I've done 30 of those interviews, Chris, in the last month since the first debate with various candidates. Some have liked it, some haven't. John Kasich is my home state governor, gets a little prickly with me occasionally. If Donald Trump doesn't like it, that's fine. Our job, and I think this is the business we've chosen, is to ask tough questions that, on my part, I want Republican primary voters who are interested in the field to hear asked and answered by all of the candidates. So I asked them all the same thing. I think it is an unusually early start, and I read Peggy Noonan on Friday with great interest saying none of these candidates are going away. Jeb Bush isn't going to fade. I said on Meet the Press on Sunday, Scott Walker isn't going to fade, even though he had a bumpy week. No one's going to fade out of this thing. And in 6 months, on March 15th, when we have the first winner-take-all set of primaries, then the field will start to clear. Until then, I expect the hammers to keep throwing. In a week from tomorrow night in Simi Valley, Jake and Dana and I will be asking questions, and I expect the sparks will fly between the candidates, not between the candidates and the panelists.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be, as you know. But but it is fair basis of criticism about how we are covering it. The criticism with you about the gotcha stuff, that doesn't resonate with me so much, and maybe that's a statement against interest because maybe I'm in the same game that you are, so the criticism doesn't strike me the same way. But you could say that what you did with Donald Trump made a suggestion that you don't like Trump, that if you liked him...
No, but I do.
But if you wanted to help him, you wouldn't have asked him those...
Trump.
But then why ask him questions that you had to know he probably wouldn't be able to answer quickly?
I love Donald Trump. He's the best interview in America, and he's been on 6 times with me, Chris. The unfortunate part was that, when you do phone interviews, sometimes people hear things differently. I think he genuinely did hear coulds as curds, and so that was fine. And at the end, he made a statement which is fine with many people, that he will get up to speed on various issues as we get closer. I have a piece going up on CNN.com today about the Iranian deal, and I was mostly concerned with the impact of giving $100 million to the $100 billion to the Quds forces, which is led by General Soleimani, who is the #1 terrorist mastermind in the world. I ask all of the candidates about the impact of the Iran deal. And so I don't worry about if there's a momentary misunderstanding. I'm sure Donald Trump will be back. He's been on so often. He's a great interview. But all of them need to look at, and I'm glad that Trump and Cruz are doing a big anti-Iran deal tomorrow. Republicans are unanimous in their opposition to this deal. They know it's a terrible deal for the world. They are unanimous in the fact that Hillary Clinton abused her server under 18 U.S.C. 1924. They are better, some are better at some issues than others. Donald Trump's very good on the wall. Carly Fiorina is very good on intelligence matters. She was part of the advisory council at the Central Intelligence Agency. They all have strengths and weaknesses. Our job, or at least my job at the debate, is to ask questions that allow Republican primary voters to decide who's best positioned to win in 2016 and to be a very successful Reagan-like commander-in-chief in 2017. That's how I view my job.
Now, you get billed as a conservative host, but let me just ask you one thing that you just said there. They are all unanimous that Hillary Clinton abused using her server under that U.S. code. Do you believe that that is a fair assessment of the situation when there is no direct charge of that by any federal agency right now?
Absolutely, and I base it on this, Chris. My first job in the federal government after I clerked on the D.C. Circuit was as the special assistant to Attorney General Bill Smith and then Ed Meese as their Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court special assistant. And I know what sensitive compartmented information is, I know what a SCIF facility is, and I know that 18 U.S.C. 1924 has a knowingly requirement in it, meaning if you've got information that you know is classified, you're in violation of the law. It's not about whether it's marked. It's about whether the recipient or the sender knows it ought to be classified. For example, I was at CNN yesterday morning. We were passing around emails about what the debate will be about. I know that those should not go outside of the circle of people working on the debate. I know that. It's not marked do not distribute. It's just something you know. I think Mrs. Clinton knowingly had on her private server very sensitive SCI information, keyword information, talent keyhole is what it's called. And I believe that this will come out eventually. I think her candidacy is doomed, and I think Joe Biden, as Rupert Murdoch tweeted out last night, is going to get in because Mrs. Clinton has no excuse. I believe it's a violation of law, and I believe it will come out. And I don't know that O.J. murdered people, but I'm absolutely certain that, I believe he did, but there was no verdict that he did. You don't need a verdict to come to a conclusion about someone's guilt.
Well, there was a civil case, though, and we're going to have to wait for some proffer of proof that makes the point that you're making now about Hillary Clinton. Hugh Hewitt, thank you very much for being on the show. Always a pleasure.